Welcome to our video about the history of TLS. This video gives an overview of the different TLS versions as well as different attacks that have occurred over time. Afterwards, I will explain one attack in more detail. TLS is short for Transport Layer Security and it is used to encrypt network traffic. For example, if you visit a web page in your browser with an address starting with HTTPS, the traffic to and from that website is encrypted. There are different versions of TLS which have been developed over the years. New developments were often motivated by the inclusion of new features or due to successful attacks on prior TLS versions. Before TLS, there was SSL. SSL is short for Secure Sockets Layer. In 1995, SSL version 2 was released. Just for your information, version 1 was never released. Because of security and usability issues in version 2, SSL version 3 was released in 1996. In 1999, SSL was renamed to TLS, and TLS 1.0, which was essentially SSL version 3.1, was released as an official standard. 7 years later, thus in 2006, TLS 1.1 was released, and another 2 years later, TLS 1.2. TLS 1.2 is the first TLS version that offers support for extensions. Extensions offer additional functionality to TLS. In 2018, TLS 1.3 was released, and this offers several improvements. 2 of them are the following. In TLS 1.3, weak cryptographic options were removed, for example, cryptographic algorithms like RC4, as well as insecure cipher suites like those using RSA in CBC mode. TLS 1.3 also offers downgrade protection, and all remaining cryptographic algorithms in TLS 1.3 support perfect forward secrecy. As you might have already guessed from the number of different versions, in general one can say that TLS is very complex and contains many corner cases and exceptions, which are the cause for a lot of vulnerabilities. Therefore, before we take an overview of some attacks, let's have a look at what happened to the older protocol versions. When a newer version comes out, it is always recommended to switch to that version as soon as possible. Despite this, the use of the older protocols is still allowed for a while, for example to ensure compatibility. If a protocol is considered too insecure to be used, it gets deprecated. This means that you really should not use it anymore. Be aware though that this is not enforced, therefore if you want to be sure that your browser never connects to a website using an insecure protocol, you have to configure your browser to reject such connections. As you can see, it takes a very long time for protocols to be deprecated, even though newer versions have been around for several years. SSL version 2, for example, was officially deprecated in 2011, SSL version 3 in 2015. TLS 1.0 and 1.1 were officially deprecated in 2021, though major browsers already started deprecating them in 2020. And now, let's have a look at the current situation. This is a screenshot taken from SSL Labs in July 2022. As you can see, even more than 10 years after SSL version 2 was deprecated, you still find servers that support it. For SSL version 3, this number is at 2.4%, whereas the more recently deprecated TLS 1.0 and 1.1 are still supported by roughly 40% of the servers that SSL Labs scanned. With this in mind, let's now see a selection of attacks on SSL and TLS that occurred over the years. Please note that the following attacks are not a complete list, there have been even more attacks. In 1996, Wagner and Schneier analyzed SSL version 3, and among others they found a man-in-the-middle attack that removes all the strong cipher suites from the client hello message. The result of this is that the server then has to continue with a weak cipher suite. In 1998, Bleichenbacher's attack was published, which is a very well-known attack. If you want to know more about this, there's another video focusing only on Bleichenbacher's attack. In 2002, Wagner's original padding oracle attack was published, which is a similar concept as Bleichenbacher's attack. In 2011, the Beast attack was published. TLS 1.0 and older SSL versions are vulnerable to it. Beast targets the CBC implementation in these older versions, where non-randomized EVs, that is, initialization vectors, were used. It is a man-in-the-middle attack, and it can result in an attacker being able to decrypt, for example, your cookies. In 2012, there was the crime attack. This attack targets TLS compression techniques. Essentially, in TLS compression, data that contains more redundancies gets more compressed. An attacker can exploit this and recover session tokens. The mitigation for this is to disable TLS compression. In 2013, the breach attack was published. This is another attack on compression, but this time it targets the HTTP compression. Again, as a mitigation, just disable HTTP compression. Also in 2013, there was Lucky 13. This is a padding oracle attack that uses a timing side channel. In 2014, Poodle attack, which is another padding oracle attack, came out. And this is based on a downgrade attack from TLS 1.0 to SSL version 3. The mitigation for this is to remove SSL version 3 support on client and on server side. In 2014, there was the Heartbleed Bug. This is a buffer overread attack based on an implementation bug, and this attack targets several OpenSSL libraries. In this attack, the attacker can read parts of the server memory, for example private keys, and I will explain this attack in more detail afterwards. As a mitigation, use OpenSSL version 1.01g or newer, because those versions don't have this implementation bug. In 2016, the Drown attack was published. This attack allows for the decryption of TLS connections that use the same private key as an SSL version 2 connections. The mitigation for this attack is, on the one hand, to disable SSL version 2 since it is vulnerable, and on the other hand, to ensure that your private key that you use for TLS connections is never used on a server where also SSL version 2 is enabled. In 2017, the Robot attack was published. This allows an attacker to perform RSA decryption and signing operations with the private key of a TLS server. The attacker can even record traffic and decrypt it later on, which makes the attack way more feasible. The mitigation for this is to disable RSA encryption, that is, all cipher suits starting with TLS_RSA. In 2020, the RACOON attack was published, and this targets TLS 1.2 and lower, and relies on very precise time measurements, and thus is usually very hard to exploit. As you may have noticed, there are many attacks that are somehow based on padding oracle attacks. Here, all the attacks that are highlighted in blue are based on padding oracle attacks. This means that they exploit some information regarding the padding validity. If you want to know more, please watch our video on Bleichenbacher's attack. The Heartbleed Bug, discovered in 2014, is, as I already mentioned, a buffer overread attack. In this attack, the heartbeat extension was targeted. To understand the attack, we first need to know what this heartbeat extension is supposed to do. The purpose of this extension is to keep an established connection alive, even though no data is exchanged. This was meant to save time because, by keeping the connection open, you do not need to re-establish it. The problem is that there was an implementation bug, and the protocol for the heartbeat extension specifies that you send some data and the length of it, and then, for example, you could tell the server, "Hello server, please answer with foo," and you specify that this word consists of 3 letters. Then the server will respond with foo. It has 3 letters, so everything is fine. But what happens if we request a word and send a length that doesn't fit to it? For example, if we ask the server to please answer with bar and tell it at the same time that it should respond with 500 letters. In this case, the server will reply with bar, as you specified, and also include the next 497 characters in its memory. The problem is that these characters contain secret information, among others, the private RSA key of the server, usernames, passwords, and so on and so forth. A lot of websites were affected by this. In fact, all the versions from OpenSSL 1.0.1 till 1.0.1f were affected. In total, 500,000 of widely trusted websites were vulnerable to this. There are two things that you need to do if your server was vulnerable to the Heartbleed bug. On the one hand, you need to renew your certificates, but what is very important is that you need new keys within the certificate. As researchers later found out, 7% of the vulnerable websites kept the same compromised private RSA key within their new certificate. This, of course, didn't help any, because since this RSA key was already compromised, it was known to the attackers. The second thing that you need to do is update to a newer OpenSSL version. OpenSSL version from 1.0.1g is not vulnerable any longer to the Heartbleed bug. So, as you can see, extensions can add functionality, and depending on the extension, this can even add security to the handshake, but some extensions, especially if there are implementation bugs, can make the connection insecure. If you want to learn more about TLS and TLS security, then please visit our TLS Academy website.